When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Eagles fans, welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II, and I'm joined by none other than our Philadelphia Eagles insider, John McMullen. Make sure you guys smash that like button. And also, most importantly, please make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. It means a lot to us, it means a lot to the network, helps the content grow, and also helps a lot more people get active in those live chats that you guys love to get active in. Now, John, I appreciate you as always for taking time out for the show. I know you're a busy man. I know the Philadelphia Eagles always run you rampant. But first and foremost, before we get too deep into the content of today, how are you feeling, sir?
Doing well. Good to see you, Tone.
Likewise.
Yeah. 9 days after 32-9 embarrassment, the Eagles finally had their end of season press conference, and even that they were 30 minutes late. So, yeah, it's been kind of a, what are they going to do? How are they going to handle it? And obviously, they decided to blow out both coordinators. Now, we knew Sean Desai was going to be out, but and there's going to be plenty of other assistants still to go. But, yeah, it certainly seems like Nick Sirianni's been stripped of significant power, as many of us speculated. You're going to have a new defensive coordinator, likely Vic Fangio, a new offensive coordinator who's going to be in charge of the offense. And the offense is probably the bigger part of the equation, simply because Nick Sirianni's been very, very consistent. I asked him this in the press conference. He has said, as long as I'm here, this is my offense and this is going to be my offense. Well, my turned into our today. And it's one word, but it speaks volumes because it's coming directly from the top. And anybody who doesn't think that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, man, you said a lot in such a short amount of time. And I want to try to go through the press conference with you as much as we possibly can. A lot was said, but let's just start with the last thing you said, right? This offense and it being how our went from my, and now all of a sudden it's our. I want to get the pulse of the room. You said they were about 30 minutes late. What was the temperature of the room amongst yourself and your colleagues? What was some of the chatter that you were hearing through the grapevine as you waited for Nick Sirianni and HRI Roseman to make their appearance?
That's not that rare. They're typically late, maybe a little bit more than. But from our perspective, we're just there to gather information. It really doesn't, affect us that much. But as far as the temperature, I would say we don't care. So that part of it is not really relevant. As
John, I love
far
you, man. I love you, man.
well, as far as the temperature of those two, I think you saw it from the start. You can go back to any Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni press conference, and we would make jokes about because there always would be giggles and little sophomoric jokes. None of that today for the first time. So that's something that was very noticeable and a clear indication that they're on to a different phase of their relationship, and it was more strictly business. And I think, you saw a head coach that was neutered, to put it kindly. So, and stripped of some of his power. I've called him Jason Garrett at this point. When Jerry Jones stripped Jason Garrett of play calling, and he became what he became, and that was a figurehead, because you're going to have a head coach of the defense, Vic Fangio. You're going to have a head coach of the offense, whomever, insert name, and then you're going to have Nick Sirianni to handle press conferences.
But John, I gotta ask you, because you've covered this game for a long time, and I truly lean on your expertise. How often have you seen this model actually succeed? I mean, you compared it to Jason Garrett, formerly in Dallas. How sustainable is this model?
It's not sustainable. This is the death throes of the Nick Sirianni era. It's not sustainable. With no power, CEO coach is fine, but you have to have power. In fact, I'd prefer a CEO coach, which is what Nick had been to this point, but now he's being dictated to. Can't have this coach. Can't have this coach. Not going to work.
Where's the line drawn in the power structure then? Is it strictly with hires? Is it does he have any? Do you anticipate him having any kind of real influence in the building in any kind of way?
Well, if you go back to the end of the Doug Peterson era, you heard the same buzzwords: new ideas, stagnant, outside the organization. Same thing. And Doug, basically said, "All right, see ya." And the only difference is Nick stayed, and he makes $7 million a year, so it's understandable. And I'm sure he'll do his best to reprove himself, is the word he used, and maybe he does. But look, for the most part, Jeffrey Lurie is a very good owner. And when you compare him to other owners, he's very good. I'm not coming off that, but when it comes to coaching in situations like this, he overreaches, and I think we're at that point again where he's overreached. And how do you save it? I don't think you can save it, but we're going to go through it and we're going to see. But ultimately, I expect Nick to go into this season as a lame duck. I expect it not to go well, and I expect him to be out next year. And they'll be looking for a new head coach.
Why prolong the inevitable then? Is this strictly for appearances? Is this like, we understand that the Eagles care a lot about their PR. We understand that. But again, why
I think
why go through this frustration? Why go through this whole process at this point? Like you said, it's not sustainable. We've never seen it sustained. Why even go through all this? Why not just move on?
Well, I think part of it is more than PR. How do you look inside the league? How do you look to your peers? And Howie mentioned they were 33-11 up to the point where they kind of fell off the rails with Nick, made the playoffs, obviously 3 straight years. And it's hard. He said it's hard to find somebody who can do those sort of things. I mean, and it is. There aren't.
Sorry to interrupt, John. Yes, it is. It's also find a head coach that's capable of winning you a Super Bowl, but you still got rid of him as well. So I mean, how much stock can we put into that statement?
Well, they kept him, so that's where the stock comes from.
It's true. They ultimately did keep him 4 more years or 3 more years. Excuse me.
They could have fired him. They probably should have fired him. If they want to go about it this way that they're going about it, they probably should have fired him.
Right.
But they didn't want to for whatever reason. And now you're forcing coaches that he doesn't know, is not comfortable with, versus coaches he's loyal to. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, if you don't believe in the coach, fire the coach. That's fine. But to straddle the fence like this doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Agreed. It kind of reminds me of the Sean Desai situation. I mean, they straddled the fence instead of just making the decision. The reality is, if you've lost trust in me to complete certain tasks, if I work for you, John, and you tell me to do A, B, and C, and I can't accomplish A, B, and C, and then you start to take away my responsibilities, at that point, you've lost faith in me. You've lost trust in me. Therefore, how am I still on your staff? How am I still working for you? Is it just because you like paying me? It can't be that.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, look, you hire a coach to do a job. Nick said that. Well, we're going to hire a coach to do a job. Which is it? You're hiring a coordinator to do a job, but you don't have a head coach to do the job as he sees fit. There's contradictions all over the place. And look, it's a blind spot. We've been through it before. There's one Super Bowl winning coach in this team's history still, and they ran him out in 3 years, and they're doing the same thing with a guy who was the best winning percentage in franchise history, and the guy who's made the playoffs 3 consecutive times. The only difference is he didn't just walk out of Jeffrey Lurie's office and said, what Doug said, no, I'm standing my ground. He said, okay, I'll do it your way. And, that's a lot of hubris from Jeffrey Lurie to assume, because let's be honest, this is Jeffrey. This is not even Howie. So you don't have to blame Howie. This is Jeffrey Lurie telling him he needs new idea. It's the exact same wording. Couldn't even change the wording. New ideas from outside the organization. Like, to have the hubris to, the guy's worth $5 billion. So I'm not going to say he's not a smart guy, but to have the hubris, most smart people know what they don't know. Jeffrey Lurie's been around this team and this organization for 30 years, but he can't pick coaches. He might think he can because he's had some success with hiring head coaches. But when it comes to assistants and when it comes to the nuts and bolts and position coaches, that's a big ego to think you can do that. One of the things I always say about fans, they talk about assistant coaches with such conviction and certainty. Like, I know Vic Fangio's great, or I know Vic Fangio's terrible. And it go down. Forget about coordinators, Alex Tanney, Aaron Moorhead, position coaches. Come on. If you're being honest with yourself, I'm there every stinking day. I can't tell you. You don't know. I'm not talking about you, Tone.
I don't understand.
No, Jeffrey doesn't know. He employs them. He thinks he knows. But, it's his team. He can do whatever he wants. That's not the issue. But to have the ego to think you know better than the guy you hired to do the job, if that's the case, you shouldn't want him.
How shocked were you? because we talked about Brian Johnson's future in Philadelphia, and you were pretty sure he should be back, or you felt like he should be back. Let's put it that way. You felt like he should be back.
Yeah.
And that clearly did not happen. How shocked were you? And also in his firing, you know, I think about this. All year, Nick Sirianni kept saying, "This is my offense. This is my offense. Don't blame Brian. This is my offense." So he was taking the bullets for Brian all year.
3 years. Been saying it for 3 years.
Right.
That he wasn't taking bullets. He said the same thing when Shane was here.
But Shane has success.
In fact, and I just looked up the quote because I'm going to write about. You know, it was the summer of 2022, and it was really a discussion about play design, play calling, because people make such a big deal out of play calling. And Nick was always like, you know, most of that stuff, he's been very consistent. Most of that stuff is done during the week as you're game planning. And, you know, Nick, obviously it's Nick's offense. He's got final say and all that kind of stuff. And he would often say, you know, that's when he would say, "This is my offense." And so he said, no matter if it's Kevin Patullo is calling it, Shane Steichen's calling it, Brian Johnson is calling it, Jeff Stoutland's calling it, Jason Michael, and this is Nick talking, Jason Michael's calling it, Jonathan Gannon comes over and calls it, Howie calls it from up there, Jeffrey Lurie, Dom DeSanjo, Julian Lurie. It's my offense. And as long as I'm here, it's going to be my offense.
Okay. Well,
and he said, I'm very particular, and I know what I believe in the passing and running game and offensive football. Well, and that was just an example because he made a big joke out of running everybody's name down in the organization to try to prove a point. And all of a sudden, he said that at least 15, 20 times to us over 3 years. Same sentiment. And now all of a sudden, it's no longer it's our offense.
That's why I feel like Brian Johnson, that's why I feel like and you talked about this briefly, not today, but previously in the previous shows we've done. You know, in the Jeffrey Lurie saga, there's always going to be scapegoats somewhere. And when I think about Brian Johnson's situation, especially when you couple that with Nick Sirianni constantly ripping and running around the building, that this is his offense, more so particularly this year, where we all really paid attention to it. And Brian Johnson gets fired. It's like, so wait, was Brian Johnson at fault for what went down, or was it Nick Sirianni? And then when you add in, we want fresh ideas. Okay, but I thought these ideas were Nick Sirianni's ideas. So which is it? Now I'm confused. And I think this goes back to your point about there's just been a lot of contradictions, a lot of, left and right, up and down.
First of all, Brian Johnson is a walking contradiction in the fact that, again, Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson didn't even have a relationship before Brian Johnson was hired by the Philadelphia Eagles. So Brian was found by Howie Roseman. Then he interviewed with Nick Sirianni to be the quarterback's coach, and Nick hired him, and he became the shooting star in the organization, very similar to Press Taylor, who wasn't even here, who was here before Doug Peterson got here, and Doug took a liking to him, but he was here. He was hired by Chip Kelly. And he was a shooting star in the organization. He found the Philly special. He was the one who found that play, put it in the offense, or got it put in the offense. Brian, similar, he had opportunities to be offensive coordinator in other places last year, most notably Carolina. And the Eagles knew that, and they didn't want to lose him, so they promoted. If we're up to Nick, Kevin Patullo would have been the offensive coordinator.
Okay. Now we're getting somewhere here.
So it's kind of ironic. And all of a sudden, same thing happened to Press Taylor. You know, you tell me for 2 years this guy's brilliant, 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 scapegoat, scapegoat. Come on, Jeff. I mean, he's got a blind spot when it comes to coaches and assigning blame. Bottom line, he's got a blind spot.
Wow. So let's just run down that real quick. So Brian Johnson isn't even a Nick Sirianni guy. And the fact of the matter is he was given the position outside of Nick Sirianni's wishes. So basically, Nick Sirianni had a guy calling plays for him that he felt that maybe he didn't feel truly understood his vision the way Kevin Patullo would. Is that fair to say?
Well, that's fair to say, but that's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't want to assume what you're trying to say. I just want to understand.
No. I just, him and Kevin are really close. Just,
right.
It's just as simple as that. But as far as Brian was operating under the same scale as Shane in that he was running Nick Sirianni's. He was calling plays for Nick Sirianni's offense. So, it's, if you don't like the play calling, and again, I always say nobody judges play calls. They judge play results. You're judging play results. It's fine. They were still a top 10 offense. Brian will be fine. He'll get another job, and he got some head coaching interviews and he got some experience, but he was clearly scapegoated. And that's what happens. Same thing as happened to Mike Rowe, happened to Press Taylor. That's what the Eagles do when they don't reach expectations.
What were your instant reactions when HRI Roseman and Nick Sirianni, more so in particular HRI Roseman, what were your reactions or your instant reactions when they addressed questions related to the defense? I feel like they were asked quite a few in pertains to Sean Desai, the linebacker position as it pertains to Nakobe Dean. I'm just curious, what were some of your instant reactions based off what you heard in regards to the Eagles defense?
Well, I think Howie's a little bit defensive about the linebacker position.
I can tell. I watched that thing twice, as far as that part, and he seemed to me very
I don't have a problem. He doesn't want to give up on Nakobe Dean. I get it. There's got to be concerns over his durability. But he could still turn into a good player. He's got talent. Then he mentioned Zach Cunningham had a good year, which he did for the most part, but he wasn't even here until August 9th or August 10th. And he was brought in along with Miles Jack, because the other linebackers you brought to training camp weren't getting the job done. So, I mean, a lot of people point at Baltimore and San Francisco, and they have great linebackers, and it's the best team in the AFC, best team in the NFC. We'll see if they reach the Super Bowl. It's not about that. I mean, they do happen to have good linebackers, both of those teams. But I think a lot of people are correlating, well, they're winning because of their linebackers. Well, Baltimore has Lamar Jackson and, Kyle Hamilton and Justin Tucker and 100 good players, and so does San Francisco.
But it also helps having reliability or stability at the position, right?
Well, you can't play poorly, but and I've criticized the Eagles for TJ. TJ Edwards better than Patrick Queen. TJ Edwards is better than Dre Greenlaw. Eagles fans don't think so. And they gave up on him. They need to get better, but Fred Warner's the best linebacker in football. Roquan Smith is a great linebacker. The other guys are okay. They got bigger names. Patrick was a first-round pick, but he makes plenty of mistakes. Dre makes plenty of mistakes. They're better than what the Eagles have, but it's not like they're the reason those teams are winning. They just happen to have good players at those positions. The Eagles have had good players in the past. They just don't value the position, and they've taken it too far. The overriding theory that you have to value certain positions more than others, the Eagles are correct on. They just taken it a little bit too far.
Right.
At
And
linebacker.
I would agree with that, right? I don't think you're wrong for valuing certain positions more than others. I think that's the nature of anything, right? In any company, if you're building it from top to bottom, you're going to value certain departments more than others. Certain departments are going to be more or going to be responsible for certain, levels of productivity and certain. You get my point, John. So I guess what I'm asking you when it comes to the linebacker position with the Eagles, right? Based on what HRI Roseman said, and again, he did come off defensive to me as well. He also came off as a guy who maybe he's overestimating his own commitment to the quality of linebacker play. I'm curious to know what your thoughts on that statement. Do you think he is overestimating his own commitment to that position?
No, I think he knows. Again, he didn't bring in Zach's the guy he mentioned. He didn't even bring him in until August. And with Nakobe, they bet on Nakobe, and it came up empty because he only played 5 games and he got hurt. So, if Nakobe plays 17 games, maybe we're not even having this conversation.
Correct.
Because the Eagles think he's going to be a good player. Now, I would argue in the 5 games he didn't play, he was okay. He did play. He was okay. He wasn't great. Maybe he would have gotten better with more playing time. But certainly, I think going into this year, you don't have to give up on the Kobe Dean, but I also think you can't count on him. I think that would be a poor decision. And, when Vic Fangio gets here, I'm sure he'll have some inputs on what he wants defensively.
Do you think Howie has too much faith in Nakobe Dean? Again, there's nothing wrong with saying he's we got to get him healthy.
Well, everybody bets on their young players at certain points. Certain young players. The Eagles are no different than anybody else. So, you give him an opportunity. And I don't, if he doubles down this year with nothing behind him.
And that's what I was about to say. My fear is he's putting all his eggs in that basket when so far
he can't do
IR twice.
I think he's too smart to do that. But if he does it, I'll be the first to criticize him. I think he's too smart. He knows there's durability issues now. So even if he thinks he can play, he's got to have a backup plan because of the durability issues.
Yeah. When it comes to Sean Desai, it seemed like both HRI Roseman and Nick Sirianni were trying to make it a point to drill that, Sean Desai's demotion was done by way of Nick Sirianni. Me personally, I don't know how much I fully believe that, but I want to know when you heard them say that, when you heard them drilling the idea that it came from Nick Sirianni and he just pretty much told Howie what his plan was and Howie just said, okay, how much are you really buying that?
Yeah, well, I bought it at the time, so I'm not backing off that. But I don't think it matters all that much from the perspective of, it's not like even if Nick Sirianni woke up and, by the way, he started thinking about it at the bye week when the team was 8-1, which is absurd.
Why even share that information?
But nonetheless, good question. So from that perspective, that's one of the reasons why I think I do think it was Nick's decision. But you can't make a decision like that without running it past the GM and the owner. So they were involved either way. They could have said, they could have talked him off the ledge, so to speak, and said, look, we're 8-1. why are you thinking about this? We're 10, even when you're 10-3, when they officially did it, and they had taken away third down autonomy before that. Even at 10-3, they could have talked them off the ledge and said, look, we're playing these crappy teams down the stretch. It's going to get a little bit better. And by the way, I think it would have been better if Sean stayed. And they went in a different direction. It blew up on them. And like I said, for the people that wanted Nick Sirianni fired, I didn't even go to the offense. I start with that decision because that decision was a freaking disaster. And that was a big, big mistake.
Which
Big
decision?
mistake.
Which decision are you still talking about? The Desai move?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Big mistake.
Okay. So it's funny. Everything that Nick Sirianni claims to have had his hands on failed. He claimed that he's responsible for this team culture and how it's built and how they and things like that. Your culture failed you in the end. He claims that this offense is his offense and he's responsible for what's going on out there. Okay, that failed you in the end. You claim he claims he was responsible for Desai. Okay, that failed you in the end. I'm trying to understand how a guy has so many F's on the report card and he still remains a part of the organization. And I think this goes back to your point that this organization cares a lot about showing signs of strength amongst their peers.
Well, there's part of that. Like, they won 11 games. I mean, how many teams won 11 games this season?
Not many.
And how we kind of talked about this. They're very process driven over results, and you got to be very careful to assume a poor result is just automatically, with these higher educated types when it comes to problem solving, they'll always tell you making good decisions doesn't guarantee good results.
That's true.
But the more good decisions you make, the more good results you'll get. And that's what they talk about, process over results, because there's a million things that can go wrong in a football game that cause you to lose a football game. Doesn't mean you made a bad decision. Seattle's a perfect example of that. Not necessarily a bad decision by Jayln Herz and A.J. Brown. Poor execution by the quarterback. Not necessarily, and it costs you a football game. You get better execution, they might win the game. And a bunch of things don't happen. It sort of had a butterfly effect. So Howie kind of mentioned that you got to be very careful when you talk about stuff like that, but you also have to be very honest with yourself and make sure you're doing things the right way. And I think the Eagles have a history of doing things the right way, with the exception of playing into this nonsense of we didn't meet expectations, so somebody's got to pay for it. Maybe the expectations were wrong. Nobody brings that up. I mean, look,
but John, that would force them to look in the mirror. That would force them to look into the mirror. And I think that's, in my personal opinion, I think that has been a struggle for Laurie and Howie as of late. I think they've struggled with that.
Well, the assumption that they were a Super Bowl team. Now, granted, I'm not talking about when they were 10-1, because then it recalibrates. I'm talking about coming into the season. It was absurd. I picked them to win 12 or 11 games. They won 11. They lost 5 defensive starters. They lost both coordinators. Sometimes I think the only difference between Jeffrey Lurie and a WIP caller is a bunch of zeros at the end of his bank account, because he acts similarly when it comes to emotion. The assumption, Jody and I would hear it all the time. Well, we would talk about how good Shane was as a play caller last year. It's not going to matter. We heard that all the time. Same team, same offense, not going to matter. Mattered.
It mattered.
Gannon was even more because they hated Gannon. It was like, oh, we got to get better than Gannon. We got to get better than Gannon. Gannon's terrible. Anybody would be better than Gannon.
Right now, Gannon's looking like a blessing.
They're the number 2 defense in the freaking NFL. And this year they couldn't stop anybody. Yeah. So yeah, it could get better. It could get worse. That kind of stuff, the Eagles should have realized. All right. Okay. Maybe the expectations were out of whack. And now you got to reboot the whole thing again. So now you had to replace. It's not their fault they had to replace 2 coordinators because that's the way this league works. They had a bunch of success. They lost good coaches. You got to replace them. You didn't let them grow on the job. One you didn't even let finish the season. The other one you blew out after the season. Now you got to start over again. Now Bick is a veteran. He'll be fine. I assume they're going to hire a veteran offensive coordinator. We'll see how that shakes
Vic Fangio is a foregone conclusion, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a foregone conclusion. And in fact, Miami, ironically, could probably try to get the Eagles for tampering, but they don't give a shit. So I probably said thank you. Because they were paying him $4.5 million, and Mike McDaniel would rather have Brandon Staley anyway. So they're like, oh, we can get rid of this contract, this albatross, the highest coordinator contract in NFL history. We can hire this guy for probably $3 million less that the head coach likes better. And they said, you want to go back to Philadelphia? Go to Philadelphia. So, yeah, Vic's going to be here. And he'll be better than Sean. But, you better get him some personnel.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. At the end of the day, it's all about the personnel. John, before we get out of here, I want to pick your brain. And we have over 400 people watching us right now. It's pretty cool. Make sure you guys smash that like button, and also make sure you guys continue to stay locked in on the content. We appreciate you. It means a lot to us. John, I want to pick your brain real quick before we get out of here. I want to pick your brain about the infamous quote-unquote hit piece that our guy Joe Santiliquido put out there on Bleeding Green Nation. Shout out to my guy Joe Santiliquido. Had the pleasure of meeting him at the Maxwell Awards, I think last year. True to form, as advertised, cool guy. I had the opportunity to read the article. I would imagine you have as well. Give me some of your thoughts after reading Joe's article, in particular as it pertains to Jayln Herz and his standing with the Eagles organization. And then we can kind of peel back the layers from there.
Well, I didn't think it was a hit piece. By the way.
Same here, by the way. I didn't think so either.
Yeah. By the way, I got thrown off. Different players on defense. Somebody said in the chat, John, I just said they had 5 new starters. I say it all the time.
John, no one listens. Come on. They listen, but they don't listen.
I say it all the freaking time. That's the whole point. That's why they had no shot of being the same. Yeah, I get frustrated. Sorry, Tom.
It's a me too.
Me
too, but we have to be zen. It's hard. We have to be zen.
Yeah. With Joe's, no, it wasn't. It wasn't a hit piece, but because he did the Carson Wentz thing, everybody compares it.
Of course, that was scathing, but not the Hertz thing. Just seemed like an observation.
It turned out to be all true. So I don't, but Jayln, the stuff is stoic. Jayln said this a clean out day. When people call him stoic and too even keeled and all that, everyth's fine when he's winning. He's a great leader. He's a hard worker when he's winning. When he's not winning, it's he's too stoic. He's too too calm. He's got to rile people. He's the same guy. Win, lose, or draw. He's got to improve on the field. He's got to get back to where he was. That's the concern with me. He took a negative direction. Maybe some of it had to do with injuries. but he did not play as well this season as he did last season. It's another reason why the Eagles had so many career years. We talked about it on defense, so many career years in 2022. We never talk about it on offense. Most notably, Jayln Herz had a career year. What you have to hope is 2021, 2023 Jayln Herz is not
The standard, more so the baseline.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I think I would agree with you on that. For me, I always looked at the 2021, 2023 output as like the floor. You know what I mean? A guy that can get you to a
And if
wild card
it's
berth.
not, and if it's not the floor, if it is the floor, then you got some issues. Then you got some. Excuse me. If it's not the floor, then you got some issues.
Right.
If that's his
Pinnacle.
mean, not
Right,
pinnacle. We've
well, I'm
already
sorry, you're
seen
right.
it.
I'm sorry, we've seen the pinnacle outside of not winning, but
Yeah,
we've seen that.
If that's his mean, it's an issue. He's got to play better. Doesn't have to be runner up for the MVP, but he's got to be top 10 quarterback on the verge of being the top 5 quarterback. And I don't think he was down the stretch. I don't even think he was close to being top 10. Never mind top 5. So what happened? Why? Well, blame it on Brian Johnson. We'll see.
Well, let me ask you this, right? I try to think a little deeper when it comes to Jayln Hurts' dissension. How much do you buy into this? You know, Jayln Hurts, a lot changed for him over the past 12 months. The new contract, new opportunities, obviously your team and his the people he counsels with, they want to capitalize on the new fame, the notoriety. You know, he's being asked to appear here, show up here, speak to these people, and you're being pulled in so many different directions, except for actually on the football field. And Jayln Hurts strikes me as the kind of player who's very regimented. He's very routine reliant. We all know Jayln Hurts doesn't do anything necessarily exceptionally well, but lead. But he's a hard worker, and I think that's where his success truly comes from. Not necessarily the talent part of it, because he's talented. Don't get it twisted. You got to be talented on some level to be in the league. But I just feel like when I think about him in comparison to his peers, Jayln Hurts seems like someone who's very reliant on routine, and his success is very reliant on the strength of his routine. And I personally believe his routine was thrown off this past offseason because of all the changes that happened in his life. Not saying that he became a different person, not saying that the money changed him, because I don't believe that. I just believe with the new opportunities, with the new notoriety, he was being pulled in many directions other than the football field. When you hear that, how much stock do you put into it? And do you think, and also do you buy into the narrative that he's very routine dependent?
Well, he's very routine dependent when it comes to the work ethic start of it. The other stuff, no, I don't buy into it, because that's part of being a franchise quarterback. And, Patrick Mahomes is doing every commercial under the sun, and, eating chicken nuggets with Andy Reid and doing everything else.
That's true. But remember what I said, the talent part of it, right? Mahomes' talent is uncanny.
That's just, you can go back to Eli Manning, who's, Jaylon's got more talent than Eli Manning. He's doing Citizen Watch commercials in the prime of his career. It's just part of it. He better get over it, or, he's not going to be a franchise quarterback that people want to market. So you either perform or you don't perform.
Right. And that's just me trying to be empathetic to the athlete, right? Trying to understand that, there's 24 hours in a day. And when you have more opportunity because of your notoriety, your time now is being allocated differently, I would imagine.
Well, then he's got to be better at time management. I can't use that as an excuse.
Okay.
He was playing well this year. One of the things is just clean up the turnovers.
Okay.
number one, and I think you're fine. People were crapping all over Dak last year because he had a turnover centric year, shall we say. And I said, well, history says he doesn't turn it over a lot, and it'll probably go back to normal this season. And it did. And he played poorly in the playoffs again. But in the regular season, he was tremendous.
History never fails, right? He played strongly in the regular season. The playoffs come, he turned back into Dak Pumpkin Prescott.
But he doesn't turn it over a lot.
Right.
And that was Jaylon's reputation as well.
Right. Even in college, he didn't really turn the ball over that much.
No. Very ball security conscious. And I think that'll return to a little bit of normal, more normal next year. And I think that takes care of a lot of problems. I also think he was banged up, and maybe we'll hear about that later down the road. There was some limitations. He didn't look as explosive running the football. And maybe we'll find something out about that. Maybe we won't, but if he's healthier, I think that'll play into it. But he's got to get better. I mean, people are giving him a pass, and he was a big issue down the stretch. And, it's interesting because we talk about the blitz and how the Eagles handled it. It's a lot of that on the quarterback as well.
Okay.
A lot of that on the quarterback. And the Eagles did the same things last year when they were successful, now in 2022. Same things. They just did it better. They're not great with sight adjustments, hot routes, and that's the quarterback, man. And they weren't great with Shane, and they weren't great with Brian, because that's on the quarterback.
Okay. And on that note, Eagles fans, I think we figured out what the main thing Jayln Herz should definitely keep as the main thing, and that's working on those side adjustments and those blitz pickups. John, as always, I appreciate you, my man. I've always taking time out for the show. I know you're a busy guy. I know the Eagles keep you, running rampant on these Philadelphia / New Jersey streets. And again, I appreciate you for always taking the time out. Eagles fans, make sure you guys smash that like button. Also, make sure you guys always remain engaged in the content. You guys can check John out on Birds 365 on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time. And also check him out. He does a lot of great writing on I believe si.com and jakibsports.com as well. So Eagles fans, we appreciate you. You guys are locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen, and I'm your guy, Tony DeShields II. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at